Will the New England Patriots select a quarterback? What about the Chargers at 5? And will Minnesota trade up? We're looking at the biggest turning points in the NFL draft on today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We are 1 week away from the NFL draft. Before we dive into today's show, do want to let you know that it is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go. The mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. There are a few teams that will decide how the NFL draft goes. The New England Patriots at 3, the Los Angeles Chargers at 5, the Minnesota Vikings waiting in the shadows. We're going to talk about what those teams should do at their positions. Do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, NFL content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, local expert from Locked On Titans, here with my co-host, Alex Clancy, local expert from Locked On Cardinals. But Alex, let's dive right in here. I think that the New England Patriots at number 3 cannot pass on a quarterback here. They just simply can't do it. And I know that there are arguments about building up the roster. Is the roster good enough for a young QB? All of that. But they're going to have the opportunity to take Drake Maye or Jaden Daniels, whoever isn't selected by the Washington Commanders. And I simply don't think that the Patriots can pass up this opportunity. There are two ways to do this. Either you build up your team and you build up your roster, and then you add in the quarterback eventually, or you get the quarterback. So basically, they get to make a decision on what they want to do here and how they want to handle it, because they will have the opportunity to trade down and let someone come up and get those quarterbacks. Certainly, there will be multiple teams out there interested in that. I guess for me, my take on it is the Patriots have to take that quarterback now, because you simply don't know when you're going to be in a position to get this good of a quarterback or to get a quarterback prospect in this tier next year. And we do this every year. Next year's class isn't as good, or next year's class is really good. And it rarely ever turns out the way that you think, although this year did when people said it would be a good quarterback class this year. Some people are saying next year's quarterback class is not very good. So even if New England does get a top pick, there's no guarantee that a quarterback the quality of Drake Maye or Jaden Daniels or J.J. McCarthy will be available. So, in my opinion, the Patriots need to take a quarterback. They can't afford to pass on one. Do you think that they should trade down? And maybe, do you think maybe they should not do either of those and take Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt, one of the top position players?
The latter part, no. I do think that drafting a quarterback is necessary for them this year. I think that it's important that they decide on who they're going to stand behind, like they weren't standing behind Mac Jones. There was never a time in his time there where everybody was bought in that he was going to be the guy, ever. Not once. And even though he made a Pro Bowl and did the worst gritty in the history of football, when they were doing flag football, this is my wrinkle to this, Tyler. Because with the Cardinals that I talk about every day, yeah, definitely one of the worst gritties in history. I can't expound upon that enough. But they never bought into him. So this is my thought process with New England specific, because I cover I talk about the Cardinals every day, and Minnesota is a team that I've been discussing obviously a lot. If Minnesota offers New England 3 first-round picks, 11, 23, and the 2025 one, like they would offer the Cardinals if Minnesota doesn't get it, or if New England doesn't get it, I'd much rather, if I'm New England, take the trade and draft Bo Nix or Michael Penix or somebody else. I think that with this being such a dart throw and there being no guarantee, I don't know why Drake Maye is not 1A. What has Jaden Daniels done aside from 1 year with a team that scored 100 points a game and they gave up 101 points a game, and he backed into the Heisman, and he wasn't a good thrower of the football for the first 2 years in college at ASU? Why is he better than a guy who now is getting like compared to Mitchell Trubisky just because they went to the same college? Like Drake Maye has shown 2 years in a row that he's a top 3 quarterback. So if they don't get him, what did Bo Nix show last year that Jane Daniels, what didn't he show that Jane Daniels did? Like, my point is, Tyler, there is not so far a gap between Caleb Williams, Drake Maye I put up there, and everybody else that taking 3 first-round picks and drafting a quarterback at 11 or 23 would not be more beneficial than sticking at 3. So I think they should take the trade back and then draft a quarterback.
That's so interesting. Let me ask you this question before we move to the Chargers. Okay, so if Drake Maye is there at 3, would you go ahead and take him?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay, and then let's say that Jaden Daniels or J.J. McCarthy is available at 3. Would you then make the trade?
If it depends on who wants Jaden Daniels at 3. Like, I watched Jaden Daniels his freshman, sophomore year at Arizona State. He couldn't throw the football. It was a very Jalen Hurts-y kind of thing. For those that forgot, Jalen Hurts was a running back with QB next to his name his freshman year at Alabama. He got a little bit better in the national championship when, his second year there, and then really blew out of the water, and he's been incredible ever since going to Oklahoma and then the NFL. Drake Maye's been consistent. So, I think Drake Maye is the second best. That's just me personally. But if they trade back, I don't think Jaden Daniels is the guy. But I think a lot of teams do, so they'll get a lion's share for that pick. And listen, Michael Penix has had 5 injuries in 7 years, 4 injuries in 6 years. So that's the only real knock. Otherwise, he'd probably be in the conversation with those guys. So, Tyler, and then Spencer Rattler, I don't know why more people aren't talking about Spencer Rattler from South Carolina, but I would. Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is I don't think that there's that big of a gap between the other quarterbacks not named Caleb Williams and Drake Maye to where you can get an extra 2 first-round picks to rebuild your roster with a new head coach and a new kind of GM. I think that would be a no-brainer. You just take a stab at one of the quarterbacks that's there in the middle of the first round.
Well, I'm with you on Drake Maye, and I think it would be a perfect situation for Drake Maye because they have Jacoby Brissett, and Drake Maye is a young guy. He needs to develop a little bit. He's a little rough around the edges, but he's got elite talent. And I think that if you let Jacoby Brissett play early on and you give Drake Maye that lack of pressure that you did put on Mac Jones, it would give him an opportunity to maybe, show all of those gifts in a more refined way after having some time to sit and think. But with that being said, the Chargers also are going to be a big domino here. Will they take offensive tackle? Will they take wide receiver? Will they trade down? There's so many different ways that the Chargers can go here. We're going to talk about what they should do. Before we get into it, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right. I've been told, and I would imagine that Alex would agree, that I'm a competitive person. All right. Well,
yes.
Everyone has a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. The best part is you can mess with your friends. You can charge them rent on your iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. But now you can also rob their vaults for riches for yourself. And leaderboards show you who has the biggest Monopoly tycoon. It's not just your competitive side that's going to love it, though. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game. Join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. All right, Alex, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Again, we are 1 week away from the NFL draft, and next week, Alex and I will be here on Thursday to preview the draft with you guys, probably have a little bit of a mock draft, talk about who could make trades, the latest rumors. Make sure that you stick with us here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. But with that being said, Alex, we just talked about the New England Patriots, and I know that your Cardinals are right there at number 4, and they could make a trade and they could do things as well. But the Chargers are a team that is super, super interesting at number 5 because they cut Mike Williams and let him go. They traded Keenan Allen. All they have at wide receiver right now is Quentin Johnston, who, for all intents and purposes, was a major disappointment.
Yeah.
And I doubt that even a run-focused Jim Harbaugh can go into the season with Quentin Johnston as their number one target. So it would make sense for the Chargers to stick and pick one of the top 3 wide receivers that everyone is drooling over, with Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze. But all that we have heard from the Chargers is they want an offensive lineman. They want to establish the run. Could you imagine Justin Herbert with a run game? Greg Roman says, as you think about Lamar Jackson personnel. We've also heard a ton about the Chargers being a trade back team, trading with Minnesota, moving back to 11, getting 11 and 23. So, Alex, I came out of the gate with the New England Patriots, and I gave my take that I think they need to take a quarterback and not move down. As someone who's one pick in front of the Chargers, what do you think the Chargers should do here? Take wide receiver, take offensive line, or try to get that trade down and get more picks?
You know, it's interesting, and this may sound counterintuitive, but let me get there. First off, I proclaimed to everyone that I hadn't done this yet. I gave my official thought, and I think the Cardinals should draft Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. Irrespective of the trade back options, the Cardinals have 10 extra picks this year. They've got their full bevy of picks and more money than King Midas's gold next year to spend on free agency. They don't need more picks. They need stud players. And I think that drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. Now, the counterintuitive part here is, of those 3 teams, the team that needs the trade back the most is the Chargers. And go with me here. They already have their quarterback.
Yeah.
They have a defense that Madden players would get extremely excited all over their body over. With Derwin James and Khalil Mack and Nick and Joey Bosa, they made a conscious decision to keep those guys and let Keenan Allen, Mr. Charger, go.
Right.
Okay? So this is Jim Harbaugh. This isn't Brandon Staley. This isn't Anthony Lynn. This isn't Tom Telesco. This is the new Los Angeles Chargers. What better for the Chargers than to take a trade back and then draft Olu Fashanu at 11, who would probably be top 6 or top 7 if it wasn't 4 quarterbacks going in the top. Or you take the top corner, or you take, whatever it is. They need picks. They need players. They're expensive. Their roster is all names.
That's a great
and no
point.
Young guys. So, yes, Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze would be fantastic for them. And first of all, it's not even close to who Jim Harbaugh is. Second of all, Justin Herbert makes average wide receivers look better. And third, they have so many holes they need to fill that getting 3, even if it's 2 first-round picks in a second, it's so much more important to them to trade back unless they see Joe Alt as being, Joe Thomas or being Trent Williams. And he's going to be a perennial Pro Bowler and Hall of Famer. Then you stick and pick there, ripping the heart out of my co-host in the meantime.
Yeah. Everyone knows I'm the leader of the alt cult for the Tennessee Titans. That's an absolute fact. But I think I'm with you there. I honestly, I came into this and my opinion was going to be they need to take the wide receiver. They need to draft a wide receiver. They need that help. But you made such a compelling case that I'm just going to add on to your case. This is a deep draft for wide receivers. So if they do get 11 and 23, you're going to have the opportunity to take Brian Thomas Jr., maybe Adonai Mitchell, maybe Xavier Worthy. If you decide to take somebody in the early second round, you could maybe have one of those guys. You could get yourself a Ricky Pearsall, a Ladd McConkey, a Xavier Legette, a Keon Coleman. Like, there are going to be a ton of options for the Chargers to get a good wide receiver in this draft. And we never know. The Titans signed DeAndre Hopkins in last July. So you never know what could happen and how you could stack your roster. The Chargers do want to be a physical run-first team. And I think dropping back, getting it, the point that you made about them having expensive contracts was just absolutely chef's kiss, in my opinion. If Justin Herbert was still on a rookie deal, if they didn't have 2 of the most expensive edge rushers in the NFL, if they didn't have an expensive safety, they're going to have to pay Rashawn Slater soon as well. And you have Rashawn Slater. So it's not like you have to take Joe Alt there, who has been a pure left tackle. Like, you want, sometimes guys can flip from side to side. We saw Penei Sewell go left to right and be one of the best right tackles. Lane Johnson, Tyron Smith. There are guys that have done this before. It's not asinine or anything. But when you have a guy like Rashawn Slater already in place at left tackle, are you really going to get the most out of a Joe Alt if you take him and you place him on the right side of the offensive line? I think he's athletic enough to do it, but you're talking about Trent Williams, Joe Thomas. Even as somebody who really, really likes Joe Alt, I want the Titans to take Joe Alt at 7. He's more of a Jake Matthews, a Colton Miller. Like, I think he's an above average left tackle, but I don't think that he has the talent to be all pro, Hall of Fame level offensive tackle. And if you're not getting that, then I think the best move, you're right, with all of those expensive players already on the roster, it's more important to the Chargers than anyone to drop back, get cheap talent that they don't have to pay for a few years. I got to tell you, you swayed me entirely by bringing that point to the table. I 100% was saying you got to take MHJ. You got to take Malik Neighbors if they're there. But that's such a compelling argument to drop back. And I don't think that they'll get the 3 first-round picks from the Vikings to come up and get QB4, especially if it's J.J. McCarthy. I think that Jim Harbaugh wants J.J. McCarthy to go in the top 5 because that's one of his guys and blah, blah, blah. So I think they could get 11 and 23 and a second-round pick next year. You know, I think that is something that they could pull off, or a second-round pick this year. Minnesota's pick situation is so crazy now because they traded with the Texans and all the stuff that they've done. But I agree with you. I think at this point, they do take the trade back. They should take the trade back. But I will say this. If they don't, they have to take one of the wide receivers. Yeah. They have to. I think that's right. They have to do that. Like, if they can't find an appropriate trade back, which we'll talk Minnesota in a second and what they should do. But if they can't find that trade back, then I 100% agree, or I 100% think that you take Malik Neighbors there. I've been studying Malik Neighbors' tape here recently, and I just, you know, it's absurd. He could be the best wide receiver of the last 3 classes of wide receivers if it weren't for Marvin Harrison Jr. being number 1 in my eyes in this class. So I agree with you. You have swayed me that they should take a trade back if they can get it. But if they can't get that trade back, I think they need to go with one of these wide receivers who I ultimately think are better prospects than Joe Alt, even as someone who's very high on Joe Alt.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, and one last thing I'll say before we pivot here to the Vikings and the Travis Shamrocker that's going on with Kwesi et al. Over there. One thing for Chargers fans to know, and I say this to, you know, everydayers for Locked On Cardinals every day pretty much, is the Chargers win. It just depends on what that's going to look like. Very rarely does a team with a franchise quarterback and a defense like that get so mismanaged that they end up with the 5th overall pick. And I understand that there were injuries and everything last year. I get all that. And they win. What it looks like, that's what's yet to be determined, just like the Cardinals. Tennessee, maybe outside of that, because they have maybe more needs, there's less bona fide proof that their quarterback is the guy because it's only been a year. But I feel like, and there's so much questions with the top 3 picks, because you don't know. You know what the Cardinals, you know what the Chargers, more than not, they win. Just depends on what it's going to look like. What the hell are the Vikings going to do? And is what they're aiming to do worth what they get in return? We'll discuss that next. Locked On NFL Thursday. Your team every day. All right, so wouldn't it be great if you could see all your investment and retirement accounts in one place? Yes. With Yahoo Finance, what this episode is brought to you by, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. Let's get, straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and your financial freedom. Stick with Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial pieces and perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets, apart great investors, and how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination. yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. So, Tyler, before we do this, because, you're my boy and it's just you and us, it's just us guys talking. Has this been the craziest run-up to a draft with trades that we've ever seen?
Well, I don't know if I could say ever that we've ever seen because, I've only been covering the NFL for about 6 years. Who knows what happened before that?
Say the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, with the possibilities, and I think what really drives that home is the quarterbacks. And that's obviously where, when you have 4 quarterbacks that, according to all these reports, I'm not high on JJ McCarthy. I don't think that he's worthy to be in the conversation with the top 3. I just don't. But with the quality of quarterbacks at the top of the draft, that creates a situation where you could see a ton of trades because, tons of people in the NFL landscape say this, but there's a quarterback draft and then there's the rest of the players in the draft. And when you have a situation where you have 4 quarterbacks, even, like you were talking about Michael Penix and how you're high on him and Bo Nix as well, like, when you have this many quarterbacks, it's just going to create a situation where tons of teams who really desperately need quarterbacks, and there are a ton of them, obviously the 3 at the top, Minnesota, Denver, the Raiders, the Rams, there are so many teams that need quarterback that it's going to create a need and a demand for the position that it could just create a ton of scenarios. And I think that you're probably right in terms of who could trade up, how many trades there could be, where these guys could actually fall. It is one of the crazier pre-draft experiences that I've been a part of.
Yeah, and on top of that, the amount of quarterback injuries last year. It's like, okay, you've got your franchise guy.
Yep.
Do you draft a quarterback in the 5th round? Do you draft a quarterback in the 4th round? Do you take a whole bunch of bites at the apple in case something bad happens? Like, do you have a true 2 quarterback system that's a backup quarterback and you pay him, between backup and, low end starter money to be able to run in and be 65% of the quarterback if he gets hurt? Like, dude, there is 2 active quarterbacks that have won a Super Bowl? Like, this is a brand new world for guys in the NFL and the quarterback position. So it's fascinating. And everybody's just trying to find the next cheap option for the first 4 years with a 5th-year option for a quarterback where you can build around him and win a Super Bowl. It's wild. I think it's like 3. Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, just off the top of my head. But
Nick Foles.
With that. So Nick Foles. Jesus.
Is he still playing?
Starting quarterbacks, I think there's 2.
Okay. Yeah,
okay?
there's 2. There's 2. Matthew Stafford and Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, Matthew Stafford too.
So 3. 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, we can math. We share a brain sometimes.
We're athletes, not athletes.
Yeah. The Minnesota Vikings are, fascinating name. Obviously, everybody's talking about them. Let me ask you, 2-parter. You don't know that I'm going to ask you this first question.
Okay.
Which is a little homage to what we do in the offseason. Do you think that they ever thought truly that it was going to be 3 first-round picks for a move up? So you move up with Houston. You're like, okay, that's going to be enough to move up into the top 3. Do you think that they knew that 3 first-rounders going into that trade-up was going to happen? Or do you think this is something like, hopefully this loses steam because we only thought that 11-23 was going to be enough?
Well, I personally think that they have talked to a team, and the team said, hey, we want 2 first-round picks to make that move. I think that they only make that trade with Houston to get 23 if they already know, hey, this is what it's going to cost us to move where we all debate everything, but I think inside the NFL, people know what's going to happen more than we do in the public.
Right.
Maybe that's obvious, but yeah. I think that teams in the NFL know, hey, they're taking this guy, and you're on the phone. Hey, if we give you this and this, can we move up to get this guy? Yes. Okay, we're going to go make that move. I think it's a domino effect sort of thing where teams inside the NFL and the decision makers talk to each other. It's a boys club. You know what I mean? It's like your fantasy football group. You think you don't know that your dumb friend that's a big fan of the Eagles is going to draft Jalen Hurts number 3 in your fantasy draft that's not a super flex or double QB league or something. Like, you just know what people are going to do who you're around all the time. So I think the Vikings made that trade because they know what the price is going to be to move up. I think it's with the Chargers personally. I think we're going to see 3 quarterbacks, Marvin Harrison Jr. with the Cardinals. And then, look, the Cardinals, I know they can drop back, get more picks, build the roster. But I think, like you said, and how I feel about the Titans, at some point you need studs. Like, you can drop back and get 100 Bs if you want, but at some point you need some As. So I think that the Cardinals take Marvin Harrison Jr. We see 3 QBs, and then the Vikings move up to 5. I got to say this, though, before you get to your second part of your question. It would be a big mistake to make that trade for J.J. McCarthy. Drake Maye, if the Vikings could go up and get Drake Maye, I absolutely love that for them. I think that would be a great pick. But I do not think J.J. McCarthy is worth that pick, and I don't think that he would be worth giving up multiple first-rounders. Minnesota has put themselves in a bad situation here, but I think that if I'm Minnesota, rather than trade 11 and 23 and maybe an add-on mid to go up and get J.J. McCarthy in the top 5, I would rather trade down from 23, get some picks back, and then take a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix. I think that the player for the value of what you're giving up would be better. So I think Minnesota knows that will get the deal done, but I still don't think it's the right move.
Yeah, but here's the thing. With J.J. McCarthy, it's not about it's not only about the tangible. It's not about the numbers and the gaudy everything. Okay. Mm-hmm. We saw flashes of Justin Herbert at Oregon, but we never saw his rookie year happening in the NFL. So maybe guys are seeing something that is just way too inside baseball for us to even see. So if that's the case and that's their guy, say it's their guy, Tyler, and they want to move up, regardless of who they move up and take, is it worth 3 first-round picks in this day and age? Is it worth mortgaging where the majority of quarterbacks don't pan out the way you want them to? The majority of them. Even if it's 51%, is it worth giving up 3 first-round picks to do it? And I don't know if it is, especially because here's the thing.
It depends on the player. I can't give a blanket. If I'm going to get Caleb Williams, that's worth it. But J.J. McCarthy, no, that's not. Daniel Jones, Mac Jones, these guys are not worth 3 first-round picks, even if they're first-round quarterbacks. They're just not worth it. Right. So
and
I have to
on top of that, it's cataclysmic if it doesn't work because Justin Jefferson.
Yes. You're a kill, and you never know what could happen. I hate using San Francisco as an example because Kyle Shanahan is such an elite play caller that it kind of changes the calculus. But San Francisco did all that to get Trey Lance, and then they found Brock Purdy. And I know that Brock Purdy is not walking through that door for every team, but Kevin O'Connell was a very skilled offensive play caller, and he made Josh Dobbs have a Jeremy Lin run at times last year. It was Dobbs' sanity in Minnesota. So if I'm Minnesota, I'm trusting in Kevin O'Connell that he can get the most out of a quarterback, and I am building my roster because I don't think J.J. McCarthy is the guy, and you never know what could happen around that corner. So to me, and I think that J.J. McCarthy could hurt you with Justin Jefferson, and so no, I do not think that it would be wise to trade 3 first-round picks if you're Minnesota to do that, but they may do it anyway.
Yeah, and you're looking at Sam Darnold as the only other option right now. It's just not ideal. What are you doing? You bring over T.J. Hawkins. You bring over. I still can't believe they didn't re-sign Kirk Cousins.
I know.
What are we doing here, guys?
You make all these win now moves except keep your QB.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, it's just gonna be fascinating to see. I know not everything is created equal pertaining to draft talent for quarterback and capital that would coincide with trading up for it. But it seems like that's a lot of cheese. It's a lot of cheese to go up and get one guy who hasn't, whoever it is, aside from probably Caleb Williams. Drake, we haven't seen an Andrew Luck come out of college. We haven't seen that. It's so masked now because numbers are so ballooned. Can you really tell? Andrew, when they knew they were drafting Andrew Luck, when he threw an interception, ran down a linebacker, got laid out. That's when you knew that he was a number 1 pick because he had everything. He was a leader. We don't know what leader is anymore in college football.
J.J. McCarthy's college team literally played football to minimize his impact on the game. Anything that we can do to minimize J.J. McCarthy throwing the football, that's what we got to do, and they won a championship doing it. So expecting that guy to all of a sudden turn into an elite QB at the next level, I think it's a dangerous game. But it's draft season, folks. So much draft content here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure that you stick with us every single day. Me and Alex will be back next Thursday. It'll be draft day. Can't wait for that. As I tell you guys every week, stay safe out there and start your weekend early.